Guys, welcome to the MoxiePod, a Cerebral Palsy podcast that demonstrates sports character, determination, and nerve. In other words, Moxie.
This is a podcast hosted by Sarah, Sonia, and Anthony. We're trying to have an open discussion about CP. We want the good, the funny, the challenges, and the achievements. Let's start building a better mindset together.
Thank you, Tanya. Well, hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're diving into another insightful video from the CPRN, or Cerebral Palsy Research Network, focusing on topics that affect many in the CP community. Chronic pain, especially in the lower back. In fact, up to 70% of adults with CP report experience chronic pain, with their lower back being the most common sight. So we thought this would resonate with some of you because it really resonated for me. Before we start the video, a quick background. So the first 15 minutes of the video cover key aspects of the CPRN network, including their mission, ongoing research efforts, milestones, and strategic direction. But the heart of the webinar is centered in new research findings about chronic low back pain in adults with CP, and more importantly, what can be done on it. We'll be focusing on the main takeaways around how to improve pain care, communicate more effectively about pain, advocate for better treatment options.
Prevalent location of pain for adults with CP. So why might this presentation matter to you? Why does understanding back pain matter to you? For adults with CP, you deserve better care for your low back pain than you might be getting. For caregivers, it can help you to support your loved one's comfort, mobility, and dignity. And then for clinicians, if we have any clinicians on the call, hopefully some of the results of our study could help you to find ways to improve pain outcomes for a population that's really overlooked. Okay, so I want you to meet Sam. So Sam is 52. They grew up with cerebral palsy. They were a part of our study, and the quote that I would use from them is that they felt like it was me against the world. Was kind of the worldview as they were growing up with CP. But now they say, I don't have any providers who are interested in CP, and they've developed low back pain. So they get some relief from low back pain from horseback riding, physical therapy, massage, but the medical interventions so far at least have been of little help. And so this is probably a common story. It's something that you may have heard before. So we wanted to hear from more voices like Sam in research to learn how to better serve people with CP. Pictured here is some experimentation with AI-generated images that we did, and from a quote from a participant that says that the doctor told me your pain is just part of your CP, and the participant said, "Well, this is old news. This is not news to me." So maybe feeling some dismissal from providers, but we've been so we want to.
Do we want to talk about that because it's pretty prevalent to a lot of the things I've gone through.
Yeah, me too.
So I've said this a million times, but like the issues with my shoulder and my neck, I kept getting told, it's not your CP, it's some other thing. It's a tear, it's a pull, it's a muscle, and they all kind of brushed it aside. Like, this not even saying it was part of your CP. They kind of just made it their own thing, and I felt so unheard. And like this little comic, it's like, I resonate with that so much, and I know you two do too, as well.
Yeah, I will say I have definitely felt the same, and I feel like with CP also, I feel like our pain, I guess this, I'll wait until later. Never mind. I was going to say something, but they talk about later.
Okay.
We'll put a pin in it. We'll try and remember.
Yes.
We'll put a pin
I'll
in
see if
it.
I actually do.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah, again, for me, it's the same. I don't have much experience in dealing with doctors specifically in regard to my CP. I
Mhm.
have some, and I remember it brings up this other issue that I think we'll talk about later. I can't tell if the pain or the difficulties I'm experiencing are separate or related to my CP. And I think that doctors and medical professionals feel the same way a lot of the time. But I've definitely there was one experience I went to the doctor and he was just asking me how I was doing, and I started talking about how I've been getting pins and needles or numbness in the tips of my fingers. And I believe it's because I use elbow crutches, so I'm constantly weight bearing. So my problem areas, aside from my legs, obviously, are kind of like from the top of my head to the tips of my fingers. So, neck, shoulders, elbows, wrists, fingertips. So I remember talking about that to my doctor, and he said, "Oh, that's wear and tear." And I remember thinking, I'm 20 something years old. Like, surely this is more than or different to wear and tear. Like, this is not a normal thing for a 20-year-old to have numbness in the tips of their fingers. So,
It's dismissal, like overall.
yeah.
I could say,
Yeah. So I don't know if I was expecting, anything, but that's what happened.
I feel like a lot of it is because these providers, clinicians, doctors, whatever you want to call them, don't know a lot about CP. And so
Right.
there's that ignorance and they don't know how to treat it and they don't know how to like necessarily empathize with you or understand you.
Yeah, I agree. And it's understandable because CP is a very complex disability, as we all know, and it has such a wide range of symptoms. So I don't expect every single GP to know the ins and outs of our disability, but it would be nice. And thankfully, I've also had experiences in which they will say, I don't know much about CP, so let me talk to somebody else. Let me refer you to somebody who does or should. And that is a preferable sort of course of treatment. So it's good rather than them, and I think this is brought up in the presentation, rather than them either dismissing it or sort of trying to funnel it through what they do understand, they are admitting, I don't know what I'm talking about, but there are people that do. So let me do my job and point you in their direction, which I don't think everybody gets.
No, I don't think so either.
You're definitely not.
Alright, I'm gonna start it back up. Okay?
Yeah.
Figure out how to do better. Some little fun factoids about pain and CP. Up to 70% of adults with CP experience chronic pain. Most commonly, it does occur in the low back, so that's the population that we focus on for our study. And they're less likely to access care for pain than adults without CP. So even though they may have a greater need for care for their pain, they're actually less likely than adults without CP to actually get care for their pain. So clearly some access issues here. So what we wanted to understand were what factors were associated with how much pain interferes with daily life, if it could be physical changes or issues with mental health, or if it could be something to do with how people are treated by their clinicians. And so we looked at both stories, so qualitative data. So for those of you, there might be some people here who are in the study, but those are when we did in-depth interviews with myself or one of my co-investigators to really get at the why of how they're feeling, what they're feeling in terms of their pain treatment experience. So that was one of the studies. But first, I'm going to present to you the study from the registry data. So this is going to be hard quantitative data, and it's going to be self-report from the survey. So this is the hard data we're going to use to help to understand what might help to what is associated with low back pain. Survey how the body, mind, and environment might contribute to pain interference. So this is, we'd say it's a cross-sectional study. So that means that we were just, for at least for the purposes of this study, only able to look at one moment in time. So this is all survey-based, it was all self-report, and it was all people like you in the community registry who are participating in this really long, valuable survey with a rich.
Hey, Anthony, I have a question. Because you know
Okay.
all the research and all that. Do you know how honest people are in these type of surveys? Or do they tend to be more honest than not? Just a quick question I
I
had.
would say because this is a voluntary
Yeah,
survey. You know,
that
people
they
are
would. Yeah.
offering themselves to the research population. I think they would be pretty honest. I don't see
And
why they would
do
volunteer
you,
and then not tell the
right.
truth, unless a particular question maybe made them uncomfortable, but I would think they would be honest in this case.
And one other thing, do you think exaggeration could be in there too? Like, we try to be honest as we can, but sometimes we can exaggerate. Is there a little bit of that? Do you think that could happen, even if it is voluntary?
Yeah, I couldn't deny that it might
Okay.
happen. You know, if we're talking about questions relating to pain or experience, it's so subjective and it's so exclusive to the individual that
Uh,
it would be hard, one, to, I suppose, express it in a way where you felt like another person could understand. And yeah, so I don't know. Exaggeration, maybe to try and express yourself more clearly, you know, and I think as disabled people, I think oftentimes as well, we kind of have to exaggerate in a way because when we're asked a lot of the time, you know, for governmental reasons or something like that, for reasons of our benefit or our experiences or something, we have to think about our worst days. You know, what are our worst case scenarios? Some days are good, some days are bad, some days are in between. But when we're answering questions about people who need to know about how much help we need, how much pain we have, what our levels of difficulty are, that kind of thing. We have to think about what is it like on our worst days because that is when we really need the help. So in that way, I think we have to exaggerate or think in this kind of way. So it might be the same for this survey.
I'm so glad they brought that up because that is a great point. Because I was thinking about how accurate this study was, and I don't know. I had to ask you your opinion.
Yeah, I would need to see the data and stuff. I'm only seeing the slideshow, but
Result.
I would
Yeah.
need to see the data and make my own sort of uninformed analysis, but I have no reason to doubt them, you know, at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah. All right, I'll start back up.
Amount of information that is helping us to learn so much more about the lived experience of somebody with CP. So we really appreciate you because I'm sure many of you were as well. I know I recognize your names, or many of you were in this study. So and for this we had almost 300 adults with CP who identified as having chronic pain of greater than 3 months and low back pain. So just to note, we have more research that's going to come out of this the registry. Now that we have collected quite a bit of data, this was just a subset of individuals who had identified specifically having low back pain. So some characteristics of who we were looking at, generally on average, their pain intensity and pain interference were moderate. So what research shows is there's a wide variety, right? The CP is very heterogeneous, and that's true of people's pain intensity and pain levels. We have people with a wide range of age here, from 18 up to 78. One of the more interesting findings that I found is that people people said that their pain started on average 18 years ago. So they'd obviously been developing, they've been dealing with pain for a long time. This actually led us to hypothesize or to guess that maybe people could develop resilience to pain for having it for a long time. Sneak preview that, and so if they had longer onset of pain, they might have less pain interference. That is not true. As you'll see in a minute, I'm giving away the results, but yeah, so that was not correct, as it happens. Okay, so here's this nice busy slide where it shows everything that we were looking at. So this is something called the biopsychosocial model. So traditional pain models look at tissue damage. So something like you would think about with like a cut on your wrist, right? So that's the tissue damage, and that's not really the right way to look at chronic pain. You have to consider, yes, what's going on with the body and the pain receptors and what's happening within your whole body, like with your brain and your spinal cord, is part of it, yes, but there's also the psychological aspects of it, or the mind, and then there's also the environment. And the environment, we know, can have an impact on how people experience pain. So we had all of these different potential factors that we thought might impact pain interference. One that we were particularly interested in was stigma. And we found that when we were looking at different potential variables to impact pain interference, stigma was one of them. We thought that perhaps people with higher GMFCS levels or wheelchair users might have less pain interference. That was not borne out as in our hypothesis. And like I said before, the years since, the pain onset didn't matter. It didn't seem to matter. So then we did find some
Do you guys know
evidence for
what the
best motor function. So if people declined in
I
motor
do.
function, they're more likely to.
I do. I looked it up for this. 1 second. I have in my
I'm
notes.
assuming it's levels of severity of
Yes,
disability, maybe?
it's gross motor function classification system. So basically, it's those who can walk unassisted,
Right.
and those who walk with like crutches or aids, and then those who are in the wheelchair, and then those who, have no real use of their hands. And so it goes,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Pain interference, if they were not employed, they were more likely to have higher levels of pain interference. If they were less satisfied with their social roles and activities, if they had more depression, they were more likely to be at risk for having higher pain interference or anxiety. And then the other things that we thought about, like gender, age, income, and all these other ones, the animations go the wrong way. They actually did not, at least according to our analyses, look to impact pain interference directly in this particular analysis. And so what we did is something that statisticians like to do, is something called a regression model. So that's where we take all the things that we think are interesting, and then we try to pick the most important ones. And so what we found for this is that the stigma appeared to be very important, anxiety appeared to be very important, and change in best motor functions since childhood appeared to be important. So these three things together of all those seem to best explain the variation, or how much variability we saw in the people who were taking the survey with pain interference. And so So what is this? So what does this tell us? So stigma matters, and so why? That's a really interesting question. We're going to talk about that in a moment. We think that perhaps people who feel more stigma may be less likely to seek treatment for their pain. Also, people who have faced the stigma associated with disability, physical disability from their CP, also who perceive stigma associated with their chronic pain, may have a compounding effect on the amount of pain interference that they're experiencing. Also, anxiety was important, and so that tells us that anxiety can exacerbate pain interference. That's not exactly news. There's been research out there showing that anxiety can amplify pain, but I think it really stresses the importance of screening for anxiety because it's a modifiable risk factor for pain interference. And so if you think that you are experiencing anxiety, you can definitely talk to your doctor about it because it's treatable. And then also, unsurprisingly, functional decline, that had a significant impact on pain interference. So we know that function and pain are very closely related to each other. And then just a quick note, we did look at pain intensity separately. So pain intensity is a little bit different. It's how intense or how much you feel the pain in a given moment, not how much it interferes with your life. And there we found that being in the Hispanic or Latino ethnicity was at risk for greater pain intensity. Having a greater income was protective against pain intensity, so less income was more pain. Anxiety, again, came out as an important factor in the model, and having more satisfaction with social roles and activities could help to protect you against having higher pain levels. So these are other things that are certainly worthy of future work. Okay, so that was a lot, but I also want to talk to you about the qualitative study that we did because I think it's just really interesting. What we were looking at here. So we wanted to understand how do the body, mind, and environment contribute to the pain treatment experience. So for those of you who are in the study, you might remember we asked you a lot of questions. So there are a couple of different studies that are going to come out of this big giant data set that is your words. And so this is one of the two. So right now, what we were primarily interested in is how the different biological factors, psychological factors, and environmental factors might impact the low back pain treatment experience. So we're looking specifically when people are answering questions about their low back pain treatment experience, what that was like and how that contributed to their pain and how much it interfered with their day-to-day life. And so what we did, so these are fun methods. We interviewed a bunch of people, about 25. We transcribed.
Are there any of those factors on the
Sorry.
previous slides that you guys relate to?
Oh, I was just gonna stop that before like at 30 minutes, but I think it's I don't think it's shocking that stigma, anxiety, and decline in motor function, are linked to higher pain. I just, the able-bodied person might think that's incredibly odd and doesn't make sense, but to me it makes perfect sense. Yeah, how about you guys?
Agree. And I will say, I think stigma is definitely a huge factor because it's like, you don't want to be, because like I feel like we're already seen as like inferior, and then like admitting it also is like, will I be seen even more as less, or you might just feel like that you might not get the help that you need. And then I feel for people where it's more mild, if it's less visible, is like they probably face greater stigma because they're like, well, nobody can see it. So I mean, luckily I don't deal with that, but I can imagine that would be tricky. And I will say, like, I think it does, like, peak anxiety for sure. And I think one thing specifically is that when you're going through pain, it's really, like, scary. Like, oh my God, is it going to get worse? Am I forever stuck in this? And it's like, is it going to stop me from living? And I think that is really anxiety inducing.
Yeah. I had a similar thing, or I had that exact experience rather, Sonia, when um I hurt my knee somehow. I don't know
Uh-oh.
how or when or anything like that, but my knee was just became really sore. Like I couldn't really bend it without it being, well, in fact, when I bent my knee, that was when I felt the most pain. It wasn't a constant pain, it was just when I
Okay.
bent my knee. But one bends one's knee quite often during the day.
Yeah.
Especially when
So,
you're sitting.
yeah, exactly. Sitting, walking, you know, going down or up the stairs, and
Mm.
that started having an impact on my life. Not in a huge way. I could still live my life, but there were things that started to become really difficult for me, and it even changed the way that I put on my shoes because
Wow.
the way I put on my shoes, I would bend my knee and push my foot into my boot or whatever. So
Yeah.
it changed the way that I had to deal with that. And I remember thinking, is this going to become something chronic? Is this due to
Mm-hmm.
my disability? Is this something that I'm going to, like you said, live with? Or is it going to get even, am I going to need like knee replacement, surgery? I'm
Oh.
catastrophizing in my head. Is
Mm-hmm.
this the start of the decline of my body due to my disability? And my husband was just kept saying like, just go to the doctor, just go to the doctor, just go to the doctor. And I'm not
Exactly.
normally one to not do something because I'm anxious or scared about it. But I did avoid it because one, I I remember feeling like, are they really going to know where this pain is coming from, what is causing this pain, because I don't know if it's due to my disability or I have actually injured my knee somehow. I don't remember injuring it, but I was afraid to go to just a general practitioner because I didn't want to be treated for something that wasn't potentially specifically due to my disability.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I went to a specialist physio and they sort of gave an assessment and proffered ideas as to why my knee was sore. Um, but eventually, for me, I started sitting down in the shower. This is like the third time I've spoken about it, I feel. But I started sitting down in the shower, and just being careful and being more gentle with my body. Eventually, thankfully, it did go away. But yeah, to your point, Sanya, I
Good.
remember thinking, is this the beginning of the end? I'm only
Yeah.
I'm only 30 something years old and I feel
Mm-hmm.
about 80, you know?
Definitely. We ate.
Right. And I feel like as the CP community, we often, it's a bit damning. It's like you're gonna expect to be worse off in the future. Like, just,
Yeah,
it's
Mm-hmm.
not just getting old though. It's the way your body moves in this particular way that's gonna
yeah,
affect you in your own particular way. And it's
yeah.
Yeah.
there, you know. So
I
yeah.
mean, not
No.
only because we have to use aids to
Mhm.
get around, as I said, I use elbow crutches, walkers, wheelchairs, whatever. These are going to have an impact on how we use our bodies. And alongside that, we have to compensate a lot of the time in terms of physically compensate. Maybe our legs aren't as strong, maybe our arms or one of our arms aren't as strong or something, or because of
Mm-hmm.
our lack of balance or something like that. We have to figure out how to use our bodies to do what we need them to do.
Right.
And thus we are putting strain on parts of our bodies that shouldn't be overused or
Yeah.
move in that way. And that also obviously has an impact on our overall pain, feelings of pain or the interference of pain too. But that's something that I feel can be avoided, but also maybe not. Do you know what I mean? Like we can have tools and we can have assistive tools and we can have people help us with things, but there are some ways that we have to compensate for our disabilities that I feel are inevitable too, I guess. So,
Yeah, I agree. I will say because like the way I walk, it's like weird with my hip that I notice that I get random like hip pains because like I don't know, my gait is like a penguin, so uneven. But
right.
yeah, so I think, and I guess yeah, that's not something I can really change because I cannot walk normally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you have to walk, right? You have to get
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I'm never gonna
So,
give up walking.
so
I always
yeah.
say to people in a pseudo semi joking manner that I'm the only person that I know that if I were to break my arm, I wouldn't be able to walk because, because I wouldn't be able to use my crutches.
All right.
So there, so
Uh-oh.
I maybe
Never break it off.
I should insure my arms and my shoulders
Yes,
and
you
everything
should.
like waist high. So yeah, and I think like we sort of mentioned, it all feels kind of not to be too pessimistic,
Right.
realistically. It sounds kind of like I think we all have this mentality that it's just going to get worse. Um, and I think that there are ways to, like we're going to see, like we've heard in this presentation, as long as we do what we can to look after our bodies, then hopefully it might not eliminate the troubles that we may face in the future, but at least it will mitigate them in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope. I
Yeah.
hope that's the hope.
Well, that's the
No, I think
goal,
you
right?
will.
Yeah.
All right. Should I start?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
We went through all the lessons and then we put them all together and we got all of our heads together and we tried to come up with common themes that we found, and we were able to do that. So we had a big team. It was very nice because we involved some PT students as well. So they got really interested in working with this population through participating in research, which I thought was really great. So we came up with some themes. Things that we asked people about were things like how they manage their pain, why they might have had a certain amount of pain relief in the past 24 hours, and then who they've consulted with to treat their pain, to really understand the why of what that person was doing right and what they could have done better. Okay, so when we were looking at one of our themes that came into the kind of psychological factors domain, there was that these interpersonal interactions with clinicians were really important. So I'll give you a couple of quotes for a couple of examples. Someone said, "You asked me before what the most frustrating thing is, but I'll just repeat that I feel like, given the prevalence of CP in the population, the general practitioner should be more prepared to address issues of pain in adults with CP and not just dismiss it as something that is to be expected or lived with." So this is very common to hear that people felt like their providers did not have expertise in cerebral palsy, the expertise that they were hoping for. Then another person said, "I can't stress enough, the key is having those medical professionals that understand and don't just accept the way they think it should be, and also having those individuals know their limits, like not trying to treat something that they're not able to treat." So it's a mix of having people with a lot of expertise in cerebral palsy and them not recognizing their own limitations and when they may need to collaborate with other providers. Okay, So when we looked in the environmental domain, we had another theme, which is that there were systemic factors that impacted the treatment experience. And when we say systemic, we mean systemic more on a societal level. So I'm talking about things like insurance or access to providers, or sometimes people were even talking about the literal environment, like the weather. So that's kind of a broader scope of the environment and how much support and assistance they're getting. So this is very common to hear people talk about how they were getting kind of like top-notch care when they were a kid, and then they kind of dissipated when they were adult. So this person said, I think the worst thing about the way CP is treated right now is that I feel like there are a lot of resources when I was a child, but when I turned 18 and became an adult, providers either just don't seem very familiar with CP or do not treat it as something that would be addressed in any way. So I guess it's just like a chronic condition, I guess. Another person said, I just wish there were more options available through insurance, and insurance covered more. And not only covered more, but it went for a longer period of time. So people talked about how they were helpful and then not as helpful once the therapy would stop. And so the insurance would kind of take the blame for that. Okay. So then when we consider the biological factors or the body, people talked about how complicated their cerebral palsy was. So we came up with this theme, compounding complexities of cerebral palsy. And so this gentleman was talking about his experience in physical therapy. And he said, you know that you can't fix his arm until you look at his back and his legs and his hips. And it's a set of comorbidities that makes it challenging for healthcare professionals. It is certainly, a challenge. We didn't get the chance to interview providers for this particular study. I'm sure some would say that there are additional challenges with the complexity of the condition. I would say that there were people in the study who identified these like rock star providers who took on that challenge and did really find helpful strategies for them. Another person said aging with a disability, and particularly aging with cerebral palsy, is like aging in dog years, because I developed arthritis starting in high school. And so I find that as I've gotten older, my spasticity gets worse, and so does my pain level.
How true is that? Oh my god.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
I recognize that. Was that me?
Yeah, it was you. Anthony. No, I just want to point out, like, they're talking about, like, how their GPs are, like, not equipped to handle their bodies, their CP bodies. But what's the incentive for them to do that also, you know? I mean, there are, specialists, right? But for the average doctor, I guess they're not trained to do that sort of thing either, you know, because they're general is general, right? A GP. So I get both sides. I totally get both sides. So, you know.
I think it just comes down to what we said before, like, we can't expect our GPs or everyone to be specialized in everything, including our disabilities, because it's just so expansive in its complexities. But what we should, I feel, be able to expect is that there are people out there who are specialized, who have trained for many years in specific issues, and who continue to train and do research and things like that. I think that is more reasonable to expect.
Yes, but it's also a very small amount of people, you know. It's not like cancer studies, it's not like, you know, something that's more prevalent, I guess you could say. So,
yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, according to the statistics I've read, in the UK at least, 1 in 400 babies are diagnosed with CP. Now,
Oh my god, I think it's more
that's
common
not
there.
a minuscule number.
No.
you know, so
No,
it's not
see,
I think in
huge.
America it's 1 out of 1,000 or something. Don't quote me on
he,
that.
Yeah, that's
and
what it would make more sense, yeah.
and CP is the most common physical disability in the world, worldwide. That's,
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
I say, what's the incentive? Why isn't there more special? Like, I'm not trying to be naive either. I get, people want to do their own thing, of course, but it's just this idea of like, why isn't there more thought put into it? Or maybe there is, and if there is, comment and say, hey Sarah, actually, this and this thing going on, but
Yeah.
it's hard to, it's
There
very
are a lot
great,
of there
great
are
areas.
there are a fair number of disability related charities. I say fair number, obviously there are other causes with far,
Right,
far more. But I mean, nowadays I think it's the best it's ever been. And charities
right,
are great because obviously they raise awareness, they raise funds, and some do research and some even do physiotherapy. But I think that, yeah, I mean, at least we have this organization here who seem to be doing a lot of research, working with physios, working with
right.
um, different agencies and things like that. I don't know what the answer is to this problem.
No.
It's more like an aspirational thing, I suppose. Like it would be nice, and hopefully there's more work, more research, because, particularly in terms of just seeking intervention, seeking treatment, it's good that for me, it's different because I live in the UK and we have the
Right,
NHS. So thankfully for me, I go to my doctor, I'm referred, and that is how it works. If I want to go privately, like private healthcare, that's a different story. Thankfully, I have the NHS, which allows me a lot of free service. And so for you guys, it's more complex. I mean, the NHS is great that we have it, but it's a slow, bureaucratic
right.
process. There's a lot of wait time. It takes, it moves very, very slowly, so it's not particularly ideal if, say, you need, and it's like a triage thing, obviously, logically. The more severe your need is deemed, then the faster you're treated. But for things like, if I went to the doctor with my sore knee and I needed to be seen by a specialist or have some form of intervention, I don't believe I would be very high up on the list
No.
because I,
You're
I could still
functional.
move
Yeah,
around and,
right.
look after myself, which is completely reasonable. But it's different for you guys because you guys don't have a national health service and you have to go
No.
through insurance and it's all private. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, there
We have
is,
Medicaid, but it's like
yeah,
oh yeah,
extremely
yeah,
hard to get. Like you have to be
okay,
severely disabled to get it. They do not give out
yeah,
easily, and that's a long, slow,
oh,
arduous process.
yeah, and it's so funny, throughout my childhood, my mom received aid because of my disability. But
Oh
after
wow,
I turned 18, I
that's
was
gone.
not, yeah, no, I
oh,
wasn't disabled enough
Like as
to
if
do
yeah,
it magically goes
anything.
away.
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
like, oh, wait, I don't want to depend on the government. It's not my
No,
goal. It's not
the
any of our,
self-existent.
yeah, it's not our goal or intention at all.
No,
But,
no.
exactly. And you
uh,
can't depend on the government either.
yeah,
They're not,
right.
it's
Irreliable.
not dependable. So,
You can't trust them either. So, yeah, I mean, this whole insurance thing is, there's no right answer. And, I'm glad they're researching because it is a continuous struggle, no
yeah,
matter where in the world you are, right? So,
And as they mention here, it needs to be, because we can all relate to one of the statements said previously. There's so much support, at least for me. I can
children.
only speak for
Yeah.
myself, but from what I glean, there's so much support for children with CP. I experienced it, in school, you're surrounded by a team. You've got your physio, you've got your occupational therapist, you've got a social worker. You have this entire group of people surrounding you at all times to make sure that you are getting the treatment and the service, access to the services that you require. And then as soon as you become an adult, it's like you're kicked out of the nest in a way. Like, oh,
Right.
good luck. And no one gives you a handbook. I didn't get a handbook telling me what services I'm entitled to, where I should go, who I should reach out to. And yeah, that's part of being an adult. But at the same time, where's the intermediary period going from having all of this
There's
at
no
your disposal to
transition.
nothing? Yeah. So that's really
Yeah.
hard.
You turn
And you're an
18 and
adult for far longer than you're a child.
Right?
true.
Yeah.
So
And when you're an adult, you're expected to be a more contributing member of society. And if you're not getting the help you need, how are
Yeah.
you meant to be a
How are you
productive?
doing that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
A lot of people talked about spasticity and had the relationship between their spasticity and their pain and that getting worse with aging. Okay, so here's the more fun stuff. All right, what can we do? What is some actionable guidance for people with CP? So if you don't have low back pain, then you can use some prevention strategies. So exercise in a way that feels good. So weight-bearing exercise is really important. It's important for bone stimulation. It's important especially for your hips. But you also want to do exercise in a way that feels good. So if you're doing some kind of exercise that really hurts, you may need to change to a different kind of exercise, like changing from walking to using the pool or using a bike. I had a patient.
Can I just say, who has a pool? Or who has access to a pool?
oh yeah,
Yeah,
everyone
I
in
mean-
Scotland has a pool.
Come on! Come on!
Bro, they're bougie over there.
They're all
I
outdoor
mean-
unheated pools, but we have them.
I mean,
I'm joking.
I get she's trying to give us, like, other things, right? But
Of
Some of it's
course.
not accessible.
that is
Yeah.
just... Okay, sorry. I just wanted to say that.
I know.
I'm
Can I
listening
just
for
say it from
a
a
while and
personal standpoint, I would swim in a public pool. I would, because swimming is very good for everyone, not just people with CP or disabled people. It's a great, in my opinion, it's one of the best exercises that you can do. I don't want to do it though, because I'm insecure about my body, and I don't want to be stared
That's
at.
another thing. Like, we had
Shame.
we had an episode about this, about how hard it is for a disabled person to go to something like even the gym. You're constantly getting stared at and I mean, maybe they're not ridiculing you, but
Yeah.
But I'm sure people look at you and they are thinking it in their head, even if they're not verbally saying.
Yeah, and it's not conducive to a good workout either. Because again, there
You're too
is that
self-conscious.
stigma. You
It
know?
always comes back to stigma.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yes, the idea of and one could easily say, look, we all have insecurities.
Right.
You're just going to have to deal with it. But that is
But-
true to
But
an
that's for a
extent.
different-
I don't think it is the same necessarily. But yes,
No.
there is that principle. But for me, the
Yeah.
idea of walking from the changing rooms to the side of the pool is the most uncomfortable, undesirable situation. I
Yeah.
don't want to do that
So,
because people will be, and there'll be kids there, and they'll be staring at the way I
Oh, yeah.
look, the way I walk. I
Mm-hmm.
just do that makes me so uncomfortable. And not only that, I know for a fact that I will, if like this happens with everyone, the more relaxed you are, the better you walk. So if I'm
Right.
like
Yeah, for sure.
nervous or tense, the way I walk gets so much worse. I get
Oh,
so tense
visibly.
and so stiff, and I look so much more disabled than I do than when I'm just like walking about my house. So there's
Mm-hmm.
that. So that will compound things. And then because I'll be worried about slipping, I'll be more tense and
Right.
I will just look even worse. And that all just amalgamates into me feeling like I'll look so disabled and so odd. And
Mm-hmm.
people will stare more. And I don't want that. Like, if I could just
No.
go
No.
directly from the changing room into the water,
Teleport.
like, that would be ideal. So that's the main reason I don't swim, is because the idea of being stared at is I don't have to deal with it and I don't want to. If someone wants to give me my own pool,
You're right.
I'll do it
I
all
mean,
the
I
time.
guess.
I'll use it multiple times a day, but I can't do it publicly. I can't.
I agree. And I feel like how you were saying, like, oh, everyone has their insecurities, but I feel like with CP, we have like the normal, or at least, no, let me not say
Yeah.
we, I can only speak from my experience. We have the normal insecurities, like, oh my God, that's it on my face. Oh my
Yeah,
God, I don't have the
you're
perfect body.
right.
And then you have this additional thing. So it's really not
Yeah,
a valid argument, in my opinion, because it's like just
you're right.
more
That's
something
a
that's,
very fair point. It's like we also have other insecurities on top of that.
yeah, the icing on the cake
Yeah. So
sprinkled in.
basically, there needs to be some kind of initiative where all physically disabled people can have a free pool in their back garden or
Right.
something, or an
At
indoor pool.
I was
indoor
just
beach.
about to say, yeah, on our income, we can all afford a
Yeah, that's true.
luxurious pool.
Yeah. I have other people pools actually with all my benefits. I have them built around the neighborhood, like just for free. But
Exactly.
maybe an idea would be like a CP
Commu
only or CP
Yeah, that's what I
exclusive
was thinking,
swimming
like a
class or
disabled
something.
community pool.
Yeah, like
Oh
maybe
my
that, like
God.
a class, I would feel less insecure because it would be everyone else that's like me, and then I wouldn't mind.
You know how like some pools have like the ladder thingies like to get out? Like
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can you guys do I can't use that. I can like I can't get
No,
out that way.
no. I
It's
don't
so
remember the
bad.
last time I tried, but I think it depends on the ladder and it depends where it is and it depends on other things. But I think I'm just able to like push myself out of the pool, like lift myself
Imagine.
out and like sit in some way, like maybe rotate myself around. But I don't think I could use a ladder. I don't think so.
Oh no, the pools I go to, they're not accessible. They only have that. So it's like in a pool that doesn't have that where it's not like as like you know what I mean? I can
Yeah,
get obviously like get up and like heave myself out, although I'm not very good at that either. But
yeah.
so I'm like that's why I also don't want to go in a public pool. I'm like, okay, I can get in the water, but how am I gonna get out?
You'll be stuck like a sim, just like swimming around in a circle as if someone's removed a ladder from the swimming pool.
I can do the ladder, but I
Or you
can't
can?
swim. So I
Oh, I
would
can
get
swim.
in and drown and be
Okay, well,
gone there.
together,
We could do all of it.
we can get in and we can swim and we can get out again.
Get out.
Alright guys, we're gonna stop here and we're gonna make a part 2 because this is quite a long video. Obviously we got a ton to say about it and we're just having such a good time, navigating through it. So thank you for watching, and if you have any comments or you want to be a guest on the show, please email the MoxiePod@gmail.com. We want to be a voice for the CP community, offering our experience, insight, and advice. We want to help anyone feeling alone. We are your CP friends. Hopefully along the way, we can change the narrative on CP one episode at a time. Alright, thank you guys for watching and have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.